Hello friends, today I will talk about a comedy, adventure, fantasy movie named Lyle Crocodile. Hector is a magician, singer, and pianist who is working as a showman in New York City. Unfortunately, none of the theater owners or auditioners want him. Recognize his face and are already aware of his lack of value. Hector enters an exotic pet shop to look for something to bring on stage because he feels like he needs something new. He investigates the singing sound and discovers a little crocodile singing inside of his cage. Hector finds him to be ideal and buys him right away. He names him Lyle after the worn-out sign on the cage. Lyle is quiet and uncommunicative once he brings the youngster home, but Hector's music gets him to open up. When Hector brings Lyle home, he finds him to be a shy, silent child. However, when Hector plays some music, Lyle starts to speak and joins Hector in practicing a singing and dancing routine. Hector uses his brownstone as collateral because he doesn't have any money left to rent the theater for their new teen performance. The day of the performance finally arrives after much preparation and citywide postering, but regrettably Lyle experiences stage fright and freezes in front of the audience. Hector must use the house as collateral for the utter collapse of the program, but he will leave Lyle in the attic unattended while he travels to try and recover some money. The Primm family relocates to Hector's old home 18 months later. Mrs. Primm is a homemaker who has produced numerous cookbooks on eating healthily because she is obsessed with it, and Mr. Primm is a math teacher who has no control over his students. Josh, their kid, is not too pleased about relocating to a big city full with hazards because he suffers from anxiety and a number of phobias. As soon as the family arrives, they are greeted by Mr. Grumps, the downstairs neighbor, and Loretta, who doesn't appear to much enjoy her owner. Grump is a stern, grouchy man who constantly complains about everything. He is quick to remind newcomers to follow the housing regulations or he'll call a lawyer. The parents are overjoyed to be in their new home, and Mr. Primm makes an effort to make it feel more cozy by displaying photos from his days as a wrestling champion. Josh has a whole floor to himself, but he despises it because at night the attic makes all kinds of strange noises. He makes the decision to go look into it, and while doing so, he discovers Lyle acting like a doll inside of a glass box. Additionally, there is a note from Hector requesting that Lyle be taken care of as Lyle is his most valued item. Josh ignores Lyle because he thinks he is a fraud. The following morning, Mrs. Primm escorts Lyle through New York City's hectic streets and crowded train to ease his nervousness and make sure he gets to class. Josh makes a poor first impression when he inadvertently bumps into a troupe of dancers headed by Trudy as they are in the middle of filming a clip for social media in the school hallways. Because Josh lacks social skills, the rest of the day is awful for him. As a result, he spends lunch and breaks by himself. Josh searches for advice on how to make friends later at home and visits Trudy's channel to subscribe to her. Josh uses the opportunity to bring Loretta inside so that they can enjoy her company when she comes to the window to sip the milk he prepared for her. Josh brings Loretta with him to investigate when strange noises start emanating from the attic once more, and this time they run across Lyle while he's still on the move. When Lyle opens his jaws in surprise, Loretta hisses at him and attacks. The cat unintentionally jumps inside and is swallowed. Josh screams in alarm, scaring Lyle away, forcing the youngster to escape the window behind the crocodile. Since Josh is frightened of heights, he finds it challenging to down the fire escape, but he perseveres for Loretta's sake. Josh pursues Lyle through the city until he enters a terrifying alley where he is approached by a large man who attempts to rob him. Grumps hears the noises outside and becomes suspicious. Lyle frightens the burglar away with a loud roar since he can't bear to put Josh in danger. The roar helps Lyle make Loretta throw up when the man flees, and Josh persuades him to stay by asking him to show him the route back to the house. The following morning, Mrs. Primm has finished assembling a number of boxes of food when she comes upon a bag of chocolate-dipped cherries that she intends to discard because they aren't nutritious. She used to enjoy those cherries, so Mr. Primm finds it a little sad and merely pretends to throw them away when he takes out the garbage. Josh goes to the attic in the meantime to give Lyle his favorite card from his hero deck as a thank you for last night's experience. Later, feeling more self-assured as a result of Lyle, Josh surprises his mother by taking shortcuts across the city to get to school. He even rides the subway alone without needing his mother to accompany him. When Mrs. Primm gets home later, she views old family films and starts to wonder whether she's losing her son. Lyle notices this while creeping about the house, and as Mrs. Primm begins to cry, he decides to try to cheer her up by covertly delivering the bag of cherries to her door. Sadly, Mrs. Primm discards them in the trash rather than using them as a pick-me-up. Josh spots Trudy walking by while he is reading about crocodiles in the school library and decides to approach her. Trudy admits she thinks he's strange but still follows him on social media because he's shy and speechless, which is unfortunate. Josh slips out of the house with Lyle and Loretta once more in the evening because he wants to go on adventures. When they go garbage diving outside of restaurants, Lyle helps Josh overcome his anxiety of being gross, and they gather enough food for a feast on the roof of their building. Josh is hesitant to eat anything because he's only meant to consume nutritious food, but Lyle convinces him otherwise by forcing some sweets down his throat. Josh tells Lyle more about his past as he tries foods he's never eaten before, including the fact that the present Mrs. Primm is his stepmother because his own mother passed away when he was 2. Josh speaks a lot, but when he realizes Lyle can't respond, he gets upset. To cheer him up, Lyle starts singing and puts on a show in which he teaches Josh a few dance steps. Grumps discovers Loretta isn't feeling well the following morning because she's been consuming inappropriate foods. Mrs. Primm searches for Josh in the meantime and finds him sleeping next to a giant freaking crocodile in the attic. Mrs. Primm tries to remove Josh from the house out of fear, so Lyle follows them and sings a little to prove his innocence. Josh opens up to Mrs. Primm and explains that Lyle is the first friend he's had in this city and that he makes him feel normal. Mrs. Primm still doesn't accept it and takes Josh out of the home to take him to school while trying to phone Mr. Primm to ask for his assistance. Mrs. Primm agrees to keep Lyle for the time being because she only wants her son to be happy. The bag of cherries is once more on the floor when Mrs. Primm gets home a short while later. She throws the bag of cherries back in the trash before noticing some strange sounds coming from the toilet. She checks inside and discovers Lyle taking a bath. Panicked, she hurries back to the kitchen and declares that this doesn't feel right. Lyle starts singing a new song while he cooks to soothe Mrs. Primm, telling her that life needs more surprises and sweetness rather than the same routine every morning. Mrs. Primm's love for the craft is rekindled when she tastes sugar once more, and she soon finds herself baking and singing with Lyle, enjoying herself like she hadn't in a while. Additionally, she picks up painting once more, and by the time she goes to bed, Mr. Primm starts to wonder what has changed. Josh discovers his mother singing with Lyle when he gets home from school. She enjoys it, so they start bringing her along on their late-night dumpster adventures. Grumps is becoming increasingly worried due to all the noise they create, so he decided to put surveillance cameras outside every one of his windows. When Mr. Primm discovers they are eating pizza for breakfast one morning, he decides to leave. He informs his wife that he has seen changes in her and wonders whether she has a new love. Mrs. Primm is forced to inform him of Lyle in order to prevent him from assuming the wrong thing. Mr. Primm panics and tries to flee as soon as he spots the crocodile, but as he opens the door, he is startled to see Hector standing outside. At first, Lyle doesn't want to see Hector because he feels disrespected after being abandoned, but Hector quickly converts him by reminding him of the songs they used to listen to together. Hector can stay in the house 15 days per year as part of the agreement that cost him his home, therefore he'll be sharing the attic with Lyle, according to Mrs. Primm, who phones their landlord. They remain up late singing as a result, which makes it difficult for Mr. Primm and Grumps to go asleep. The following day is supposed to be family day, but Mr. Primm decides to go running alone since he is too confused by these changes in his life. Hector meets up with Mrs. Primm and Josh and offers to let Lyle come along if he wears a Gators team t-shirt. He explains that this is because no one on the streets will want to believe that there is a genuine crocodile living in New York. The four of them wind up having a great time together while touring all the famous locations in the city, and when Mr. Primm gets home, he discovers everyone playing games. Still perplexed by this, he chooses to disregard them for the time being, so Lyle pursues him in an effort to persuade him otherwise. He asks Mr. Primm to fight in his old wrestling costume and pretends to lose in order to make Mr. Primm happy. Since he has regained his self-confidence, Mr. Primm is able to manage his difficult students and is relieved to see Lyle and Hector. Hector pulls a reluctant Lyle along with him to sing at least one song one day as a way of showing the family how much he appreciates them. Hector doesn't get why Lyle feels comfortable because he likes the Primms and believes Lyle is ready to perform on a stage in front of an audience once more. Josh objects to the idea of Hector taking Lyle to another talent show when he sees them, saying that what Lyle really needs is a family and a place to call home. Hector disagrees and tells Josh that Lyle's destiny is to be a performer before removing the crocodile on his bicycle. Hector delivers unfavorable news hours later. Lyle froze on stage once more. While Hector sneaks out of the window to hunt for a means to get money to settle his obligation, Josh rushes to give his pal a hug to comfort him and tell him that he's amazing just the way he is. The following day, Grumps pulls the Primms into a HOA meeting, accusing them of concealing information and attempting to get the other neighbors to vote for their eviction. Hector, who interrupts the meeting to point out that Grumps put his security cameras without official approval, meaning he is technically spying on everyone, saves the Primms from having to defend all the commotion Lyle has been making. Grumps kicks everyone out while threatening to exact revenge because he is enraged over being exposed as a hypocrite. Hector is immediately gone after the Primms thank him for his assistance, but they soon discover why. Lyle has been sold to wildlife control, who are here to apprehend Hector for his help. Josh begs Lyle to sing so he can prove he isn't a wild animal, but Lyle still struggles to perform in front of strangers and is brought to the zoo. Grumps observes everything and now has sufficient evidence to hold them legally liable. The Primms see Lyle in the zoo the following day. Josh wants to save Lyle, but his parents argue that it might be best for him to leave him in the care of other crocodiles and professionals. Josh is disturbed by this and starts rambling about how Lyle helped him become braver, which sends him into a panic episode and causes him to pass out. Lyle spends that evening singing by himself in a corner because he is unable to interact with the other crocodiles. As Hector departs the city with his money, it becomes abundantly clear that Lyle is no longer a part of anyone's life. Mr. Primm hangs up his wrestling gear, Mrs. Primm loses her creative spark, Loretta refuses to eat, and Josh cries himself to sleep on Lyle's bed. The following day at school, Trudy approaches Josh and informs him that her dance company will be participating in a talent competition after observing his dejected demeanor. She tells him the tale of her rattlesnake, who vanished for 6 weeks, in order to give him reason to remain hopeful. Miracles do happen. Trudy believed her beloved cat had passed away until the neighbors discovered him. Josh discovers Hector waiting outside the house in the evening. He says that although he had behaved out of necessity and fear, he now regrets them, and that they must put their differences aside in order to save Lyle. Josh disregards Hector because he does not believe that Hector has altered his ways. Hector arrives at the zoo by himself, determined not to give up, and ties his own hands to the bars. When the security guard arrives to investigate the commotion, Hector uses magic to deceive him and handcuffs him instead, allowing him to grab the zoo keys in the process. Hector then enters the crocodile pit covertly, but Lyle ignores him while the other crocodiles approach dangerously close. Josh arrives at that precise time, but he declines to assist Hector because he first needs to put things right. Hector acknowledges that he mistreated Lyle but that those times are behind him and that going forward, he will let Lyle live with his real family, the Primms. Hector eventually apologizes to Lyle for his behavior. When Lyle eventually responds to this, he agrees to join them in fleeing. By the time the three exits the building, it is nearly morning, and several police officers are waiting for them outside. Hector says he has his bike parked nearby, but Josh believes Lyle can't always be on the run and that they need to find a method to reveal his true identity. Josh realizes that's their only opportunity when a bus advertising the talent contest Trudy will be attending passes by. Josh displays concern of riding a motorcycle, but Lyle persuades him to be brave by demonstrating to him that he still has the hero card he had given him while Hector uses some magic to divert the police. Josh then gets on the bike. While calling Trudy to beg her to open the backstage entrance for them, Josh rides the bike very awkwardly but nevertheless makes it to Times Square. Trudy becomes somewhat frightened when she sees Lyle, but Josh calmly explains, and she agrees to give them her spot in the competition. Everyone becomes alarmed when they see a genuine crocodile and Lyle and Josh manage to force their way onto the stage. Lyle freezes once more in response to this, and while the police and animal control are also approaching, Josh starts singing on his own, despite the fact that he is afraid and a terrible singer, to cheer him up. As a result of witnessing the child's bravery, Lyle is inspired to face his own fears. He soon starts singing as well and recruits Trudy's group to dance alongside him. He is well liked by the jury and the audience, and the police eventually back off. The Primms end up in court a month later when Grumps accuses them of harboring an unusual animal as a pet in violation of the law. The judge agrees with Grumps, but Hector arrives with some important news before the judge can make his final ruling. The original deeds to his home, which Grumps had stolen from him, have been found thanks to Loretta. These documents show that his grandmother, who founded the New York City Zoo, once owned the home. As a result, the city of New York granted a special waiver allowing any exotic animal to be kept as a pet there. The judge grants the Primms' request right away, and while the family rejoices, Loretta eventually leaves Grumps and joins them to become a pet as well. A few dates later, the Primms take Lyle and Loretta on vacation with them. Hector is a little bummed because he had already scheduled Lyle's performances, but he quickly finds a solution when Trudy comes to him with the ideal replacement. It turns out that her viper is a brilliant beatboxer,